Hello, Steve. Hello, colleagues. Episode 9. We have been working systematically through all of the items we would expect to see in a situational analysis. Today, we're going to be dwelling on every student known, valued, and cared for, and you're going to take us into a subset of that.
Yes, so as we break it down, James, every child known, valued, and cared for is one of our strategic goals. It is certainly one of the most important aspects of running a school. We've broken every child known, valued and cared for down into 4 subsets. So we're going to look at student attendance, we're going to look at suspension, we're certainly going to look into the wellbeing framework and making an analysis on that, and finally we're going to look at the Tell Them From Me data. Today though, we're going to hone in on attendance, and our focus is going to be on looking inward.
Well, you don't have to convince me. I know why attendance is so important. We've had these discussions many times in Lake Macquarie West. There are only 200 teaching days a year.
Yep. And James, out of a conversation where you and I were postulating around the importance of attendance, I've mapped the Glenrock data. So I've got 13 primary schools. On the vertical axis is the percentage of students who are attending at or above 90%, and on the horizontal we've got the top 2 bands of reading. What you can see there is that there's an absolute linear relationship
very close, isn't it? Yeah.
Between attendance and top 2 bands. My schools range in FOEs from 18 through to 198, and it's really interesting, the 18 isn't the highest nor is the 198 the lowest. Attendance is a better predictor of top 2 bands than FOE. We sent this down to CC, asked them to have a look and see if statewide, and whilst we can't show you that data because we don't own it, there was still a very strong correlation statewide. So to me, of all the school improvement targets, attendance is the most important.
Well, there's a logic model there too. You have to be at school to learn.
Yep. Build it and they will come.
So as usual, Steve, we like to frame this in the 3 categories of looking inward, looking outward and looking forward. So what are we going to look inward at, Steve?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is going to just the straight data that exists in Scout, and if we can bring up the video presentation, James. Okay, James, so to make sure that the instructions are idiot-proof, I'm going to give them and you can enact them.
Well, I'm an idiot.
Perfectly qualified. Okay, so if we can go into your Scout tile, please, and access Scout reports, go through to Department of Education, and that should bring up all of your tiles, and if it doesn't, you can click on the My Apps See All. Now, there are 2 ways of going into this. There is attendance and engagement. There's also through enrolment. Now, my understanding is not everybody might have the attendance and engagement tile just yet, so we might go through the enrolment, takes us to the same place, although it's not quite as logical. On the left hand side, if you scroll down please, James, down to attendance and click on attendance again.
Right, there it all is.
Now, the first report that comes up is absence by day. This is a fantastic report. Unfortunately, the COVID period has obviously impacted on the schools that we've got up at the moment. Otherwise, the scale would be much better for us to be able to see. What we're looking for here is we're looking to see patterns. Look for individual days where there's significant numbers of students away for whatever reason, but also particularly if there's patterns, and it might be Fridays or Mondays, it might be the last week of term.
I'm going swimming carnival.
Yeah, swimming carnival's a great one, and once we start and have a look and we can question if that many students don't come, is the swimming carnival in our current format the way we should be running with it? Okay, we might go down to the next one, which will take us, the one I'd like us to go through is into percentage of student attendance at or above 90%. Now, we've got a couple of schools up there and we'll block their names out so to protect the innocent. We know that the school target now is around 90%, and this is a really important body of work. 90% to me is still a very low benchmark, James. It's a 9-day fortnight. And
I wish I could get away with 90% attendance, Steve.
yes,
Yeah.
well, hopefully Mark's listening. You might give us a roster day every so often. But if we focus in on this and have a look at the schools, obviously we want to be comparing this year to last year. I would obviously leave out the COVID period, but we want to be having a look at that against our targets and looking at if we're on track or not. And once we start to look at the 90%, I think the next scale down, and you'll need to go in through either EBS4 or through Central if your school uses Central, and to look at those students that are coming 80 to 90. That's where you can get significant uplift, but for the minute we're just collecting our data.
All right, so I'm looking here at the scholastic year at the display at the bottom,
Yes.
Steve. So I'm seeing a big difference there, for example, between kindergarten, kindergarten between itself at different times and the other grades.
It's really interesting, and we've got primary schools up as our example, James, but Year 6 is, regardless of school I look at, always comes up the worst. So when we're starting to collect that data, part of what we're going to do next is to start to think about themes that might involve further inquiry.
So how are we going to record this? This is looking inward, so we're looking, it's very interesting, but what are we actually writing down at this point?
So at the moment we're going to take out any of the data that resonates with the school. We're going to look to capture the data, but then to place some thoughts next to it and possibly some further inquiry questions, and we'll get to that in the next part of this episode.
So, Steve, I could either use my snipping tool here and put that aside and put it on a slide for discussion in the staff room. I can press these three dots and export the data into a spreadsheet.
And in many of these I like to look at as a table, although these ones are obviously just in a colour-coded table anyway.
You can even share it to Teams.
Yep. And those three ellipses, James, are very worthwhile having a look at. And finally, if we can now have a look at attendance rate by term, where we're looking at 90% before, this is the total attendance that we're looking at. We have a dog barking in the background just to show that we live in the real world. Okay. Again, you need to have a look and be doing that comparison over previous years. Look to see if there are trends. Now, for our schools, there are some positive signs there, but need to use this data as the first point to take a deeper dive.
Okay. We going? So the Scout data was very interesting, Steve. Probably worthy of putting on the agenda at this point is the part day exemptions. They are definitely going to affect the bottom line of attendance. And I've noticed I'm signing a few more of them these days than I used to. So it's worthwhile having a discussion about. What do you think?
Absolutely. And the question for the school is, how many students have been on a part-day exemption? How many hours or days in teaching time have been lost? And then a comparison from 2020 to 2019 to 2018. Is this number static? Is it on the decline, or, as we would suspect, most likely on the increase? Particularly given that we've learnt a lot from the COVID period, there's an opportunity now for, rather than students being on part-day exemption, in many cases I believe they can be learning from home. And so collecting that data and having a look, once you collect it up, I think that some principals might be very surprised in just the amount of teaching time that's lost to them.
So at the very least, an essential part of looking inward is looking at those PDEs.
Yep. Which now takes us through to the third component, which is one of the ones that we've used for quite a while, which is the self-evaluation process. Now, this was a locally developed document, and many of our principals will be very familiar with it. We've identified 6 domains: the system processes, communication, monitoring and intervention, student wellbeing, interagency and exemptions. And as with any of our work, we need to acknowledge those people that contribute. And this work was done quite a while ago with myself and Kylie Walsh. When we first introduced this in Lake Macquarie, we ran it across what were two networks then that are now 4. In that first year, we made 22,000 extra teaching and learning days available, and you wouldn't be surprised our NAPLAN results kicked as a result. The process is very simple. when we're looking at each of the aspects, it's available on the website. It's an interactive PDF document, and we're asking teams at school to make the choice around whether they're developing, delivering, or excelling. You'll see in the delivering category there are numbers. They relate back to the attendance policy. And the basis of this is if you are in the delivering column, you're compliant with the policy. At the end, what we're going to ask you to do is to go back, have a look at the areas. Well, if you're not delivering and you're in developing, that's an immediate rectification because you're not compliant. But where are the biggest levers where moving from delivering to excelling is going to improve your student attendance, which ultimately will improve your results.
So this has got very much the look and feel of the CEF about it.
Yes, well, it was prior to the CEF. I think it was.
Man before your time,
yeah. But, well, we like to lead and let others follow, James. It's a great piece of work, and the principles that have used it are really highly complimentary of how easy it is to use and the difference that it makes.
Yeah. And this is an opportunity to involve the leadership team, all the whole staff.
And a great opportunity to bring aspirants along as part of the journey. Following on from that, the next piece that sits with it is just a summary, which just allows you to go through and collect in each of those and get a snapshot of exactly where you're at. And if we think of those three categories as being non-compliant, compliant, and to great. So we're trying to move along to the right. Now, we often are evolving as quickly as we can, James. And in addition to the current matrix, what we've spoken about and what will be up on the website, even though it's only in its beta format at the moment, will be a very simple matrix that focuses around the focus on 90%. Students attending at or above the 90%, and those areas, again, developing, delivering, or excelling. So there'll be a second self-evaluation matrix that will be available for schools to use.
Great.
Okay, having gone through looking at the Scout data, collecting information around part day exemptions and self-evaluation, the two different, do you say matrices? Or
matrices?
Yeah, I hurt myself.
Teaching him English.
Yes. We might start to look at secondary data, and we're very big on the primary data, but we need to have a look and start to know where we need to chase additional data.
And by secondary data, you don't mean secondary schools, you mean data from a second source.
Yes.
Okay.
I put up the tool, like everything, James, if something's great that somebody else has developed, we steal it. This body of work has come from CC. Many of our principals will be familiar with it. It's the QDAI. So we propose a question, we work out what data we're going to look at, we then do an analysis of the data, and having looked at the data, then we look at what the implications are for that. And there's a very nice little summary there, continue, change, collect, or connect. Now at this stage, we're obviously not going to the point where we're trying to write our plan, but where we might use this, for example, if I can give you two. When you were looking at the daily analysis, we might have proposed a question that our data or our attendance data falls dramatically on any day that it rains. So the data that we'd look to do is we'd go in and we'd go to a weather website, collect the data for our local area and analyse whether there was a correlation between wet weather and students not attending. Now that might pose a second question, that if it is raining, what can we do to make our school a more welcoming environment so that we improve student attendance? And for that data, we might decide that what we need to do is to conduct focus groups with our students.
Yeah. Why do you stay away on rainy days?
What can we do to make the school better? And it might be as simple as we're not opening the classrooms in the morning and they have to stand around getting wet waiting to go into school. But we analyse those data, and from wherever we collected or identified the data source, we go through what are the implications, what does it mean for us, and what can we do differently. What might be another example, James?
In terms of inquiry questions, another good one would be, given that we're looking at the percentage of students who are attending 90% or over, we might look at that next layer down, the kids who aren't quite at 90%, but maybe 85 plus, right? My rationale being, I'm having a guess that that's a large group in most schools. It would be good to put a face on that data, see who they are. But I'm also suggesting that they might be the first port of call for high leverage targeting.
Yeah. And a further dive into what's causing them to be there would be a great use. But this QDAI tool works obviously not just in attendance, but wherever we're collecting data, and we're starting to get I wonder if that means questions. A great tool to use. So having collected the data, James, we're now looking to pull in the 4 components: the Scout data, the part day exemption, the self-evaluation, and looking at those QDAI or secondary sources of data. And that's going to give us a body of information purely around attendance. In our next episode, we're going to look into the wellbeing framework. We're going to take a similar process to look at diving into to look at how we evaluate within the school looking in, and ultimately we're going to collect all of this information and use it in our secondary component, which will be looking outward around what does the research and evidence base say, before we finally go to the third area, looking forward, and what are we going to do as part of our new school improvement plan.
I think I said, Steve, at the beginning, there are only 200 teaching days a year. And this attendance aspect becomes so important because, across our networks, we have a lot of FOEs out there, a bit north of 100. They seem to equate to high attendance issues, and they seem to equate to low growth or low achievement issues as well. Every day a student misses a quality reading lesson or a quality numeracy session is a day that they just don't have. So that's why this work is so important, and why this real rigorous look into it will guide results.
And we know the foundation work that goes on in primary school, that's what has an impact within the HSC. Not just the habits of it having high attendance rates, but in getting those foundation literacy, numeracy and deep thinking skills. So we'll look to bring you the next episode, which I think will crack us up into double digits on looking at student wellbeing framework.
Hooray for us.
Have a great week.